My name is Stephanie Barger, and I'm the Director of Market Transformation for True. And I'm joined today by my colleagues, Celeste McMickle and Susie Westrup, and they will be facilitating the Q&A. Our agenda for today is we will do a short introduction with True, and then we'll introduce our two incredible speakers. We are holding all the questions and discussion until after both speakers. However, you can put either your questions in the Q&A or in the chat. And then today we're going to try something new, and we're going to have speed networking. So we'll explain that after the Q&A. We're going to do 2 sessions. If you can't stay for the speed networking or can only stay for 1 session, that is completely fine. But we look forward to hearing how you like it and all the new connections you'll be making. So what is True? We know most of you are already very familiar with it, but True stands for Total Resource Use and Efficiency. And that especially is our focus today, is what are those resources and how can we best benefit from using the zero waste hierarchy? We want to help you manage these commodities, and we want to drive transition. And that's what these pioneers will show us today. Our goal is to divert all solid waste, but more importantly, we want to create that circular closed loop economy. We have many amazing resources, so we hope that you will go to our website. We offer all of these for free, so you can get started on your zero waste journey immediately. If you don't find what you need on our website, please email us and we will get those resources or develop them for you. So this is our first poll, if everybody can take it. We would like to know why you want to join or what you want from these True community calls, and then also a little bit about yourself. So we will give everybody about 30 seconds to complete that. And once again, you can put your questions and also information into our chat in our Q&A. We'll give you a couple more seconds to complete that. Great. And Susie, if you'll show us the results.
Yeah, and there was also the second polling question that came up, which is what category best describes your role? So you had a chance to answer both of those at the same time. So here are the results.
Well, great. Number 1 is user experience and best practices. And second on the list is tools and resources. And that's what we'll be providing today. Of course, we have many more. And then a lot of consultants and people working for company and emerging professionals, which I get really excited about. It's these young people that are learning more and going to be taking over the zero waste movement, hopefully soon. Great. So our first speaker is an emerging professional, young, wonderful woman, Samantha Summers. Samantha and I met probably about 10 years ago when she was working for Sustainable Works. Since then, she moved on to Rethinking Disposable and led that incredible program. And then recently she joined UPSTREAM and is the Director of Business Innovation. And Samantha is going to share some great resources on reuse and most importantly, case studies and how much money you can save and make. We have a couple of polls before Samantha starts speaking. So Susie, if you'd like to share those. So first of all, where are you at with reusables in your food service?
And these will launch both at the same time. So just wanted to.
Great. And what are your obstacles? So we might not have it listed. If it's not listed, you can put it in the chat. And I know Samantha will be touching on most of these, but if you need more information or you have different obstacles, please put those in the Q&A and we will get those answered for you. So we'll give everybody a couple of seconds to do this. And I think we have Samantha's website also in the chat, so please take advantage and review the website, sign up for their e-newsletters.
All right, it looks like results were almost 50% of folks have voted, and I think that might be where we're going to meet our peak here. So I'll go ahead and share these results with everyone.
So most of us are on some reusables. So we want to get that up to most, and we'll have those tools to do that hopefully today. And then infrastructure. Very interesting, and yet it is very important. And most of our buildings are not designed for zero waste. And that's what we're really excited about is helping people get that infrastructure in place and quit designing for wasteful buildings, but design for zero waste buildings. So with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce Samantha Summers.
Hi all, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where I find you. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for the invite, and I'm going to start sharing my screen. You should be able to see a bunch of colorful, circular upstream logos. Awesome. Well, great. Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction, Stephanie. My name is Samantha Sommer, and I am the Director of Business Innovation for the national organization UPSTREAM. Let me do it this way. At UPSTREAM, we are innovating the solutions to plastic pollution. But for us, the culprit isn't just plastics, it's actually all single use. And as our founder, Bill Sheehan, said, we're never going to be able to recycle or compost our way to a sustainable future. We have to work upstream, hence the name, to redesign the systems generating all the waste in the first place. Now, imagine a city where you and I get our goods and services without all the waste, where restaurants, the campuses that you dine in outside of your home are serving you on real plates, cutlery, and cups, where takeout, delivery, event catering is in sanitized, reusable cups and containers, where restaurants, meal delivery, grocery stores are using services that provide them with clean, sanitized, reusable to-go containers. Any large-scale event that you attend, your beer or soda or whatever else you're drinking is coming in a reusable cup. You can order your groceries, cleaning supplies, and personal care products delivered right to your home in reusable containers, in a reusable box tote or tote bag. Or imagine a city where there's tens of thousands of jobs that are created to support this vision for the reusable and refillable economy, where litter and solid waste costs are down and community pride is up, where the reuse or refill option is as easy, cheap, convenient, accessible, and fun as the current single-use items that are flooding our market today. And what if none of these innovations required you to lug around a bag of reusables everywhere you go, but made it super easy and convenient? And I think people are really getting tired of all the single-use waste, especially during this last unprecedented 16 months or so of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think that for the first time in a long time, you know, we were kind of approaching peak plastic and peak waste awareness, because no longer was all of this packaging kind of, you know, away or out of the home, but it was actually right in your home. And community leaders and policymakers are working to co-create the conditions for this thriving reusable economy. So at UPSTREAM, we are innovating towards and co-creating a future world focused in refill and reuse, primarily targeting the food service industries. And through our business innovation, social impact, and policy change campaigns, we're really working to show the world that reuse wins, essentially, that reuse is possible, to kind of demystify this idea of where reuse is happening, how it's working, and how it's not only the win for the planet, it's a win for people's health, it's a win for your business. And so today I'm going to walk you through 2 case studies. I saw that, cost is a major perceived barrier to implementing reusable food service systems. And I'm really excited to show you through these 2 case studies how that is very much not the case. And in my hundreds of businesses, large scale institutions and restaurants that I've worked with to implement transitions to reuse, we've proven every single time that yes, there is an ROI. Once you've reached your payback period, there is significant cost savings annually from the reduced procurement and also from restructuring your hauling services. And yes, that is net cost impact, and it does take into account all of the setup and ongoing costs that are required to transition to and to maintain a better reusable system. So the first case story that I'm going to walk you through, so I'm going to be showcasing a school district and also a corporate campus, because I think they have very differing operations at play that I thought would be unique to showcase these results. So the Palo Alto Unified School District, their contracted food management company is Sodexo. They have 12 elementary schools where they were feeding about 3,400 students a day. All food was prepared in a centralized kitchen and delivered out to the schools for distribution to the end users, the students, in all single-use food packaging. And there was an aggressive stakeholder team involved to develop and implement and, of course, evolve this pilot over time. Oh, let me say too that, oops, go back. So also wanted to mention that all of these impacts are only representing 41 weeks out of the calendar year for the 180 school days where food service operations are happening. So before we went in there and worked on the transition process to reusables, we were looking at targeting 7 different types of single-use items, including 2 sizes of food trays, plastic spoons, plastic forks, plastic sporks, and 2 sizes of clamshell containers. They were going through over 500,000 units of those single-use items, costing over $32,000 and generating almost 5 tons of materials that we consider waste. If it requires downstream management and sorting, processing, hauling and processing, to us, that's waste. The school district initially invested almost $20,000 in the setup cost to cover the purchase of the reusable foodware and also to get some supportive infrastructure such as, additional drying racks, dish trays, bus tubs, things like that. The annual ongoing cost to the school district was $27,000 for an additional van driver to go around to the schools and do the reverse logistics of picking up the used containers and other foodware to bring back to the centralized kitchen for washing, drying, and restocking for next day's service. They were repurchasing a little over $3,400 worth of reusables to replace lost or damaged items. And because we were able to reduce their organics and their trash at each school site by a yard a week, we were able to restructure the hauling contract, and that led to almost $24,000 in savings. So after implementation, and this was about a 6-month process to get to the final end results, we eliminated over 425,000 pieces of single-use items. It saved the school annually. Net cost savings was over $25,000 per year, school year. Over 4 tons of waste was eliminated, 36.6 metric tons of CO2 equivalent emission reduction. And because the pilot was so successful, they started to roll out into a phase 2, because if you remember, we were only targeting 7 products in the phase 1 of the pilot. And I always recommend maybe not ripping the Band-Aid all off at once first, but to actually kind of go in incremental steps to ease into each new level of the transitions based on how easy to hard they are to implement. So at the school sites here, you'll see the setup of the collection bins with the cute little, add-on for the sporks, the stainless steel sporks that they replaced. They had a 98% reduction of those targeted single-use items. We eliminated 5 out of the 7 items altogether, and the payback period averaged 9.5 months. I wanted to include this slide because, as I mentioned before, Upstream's real mission is not just single-use plastics, but all single-use. And I like showing this because this shows the reduction of greenhouse gases broken out by material type. And I think that this paints a really lovely picture that 80% of the greenhouse gas emission reduction actually was from our fiber foodware that really does have a lot of environmental impacts and cost impacts of its own. And in pilot phase 2, if you can see here, you have the single-use plastic ramekins with the single-use plastic lids for those ramekins. And a lot of their fruits, actually like the apples on the right, would have been wrapped in plastic. And they had worked with the public health department to develop a standard operating procedure that was signed off on and approved, where you can see on the right now, all the snacks were actually assembled in stainless steel ramekins. And it was in a sneeze guard, like kind of where you would see a salad bar and utensils to grab their fruits. And this is a visual image of showing how much of the organics were reduced from pre-pilot to post-pilot, leading to that restructuring of the hauling contract with Green Waste in Palo Alto. Now I'm going to move on to a little bit different operation with a different contracted food management company, Bon Appetit. Genentech's campus in South San Francisco, we targeted 1 of the 9 campus cafes to pilot reuse. Basically, there was quite a large stakeholder team required to assemble to make this vision come to reality and to help it stick and be successful over time. This campus cafe, even though their whole campus community is about 14,000 daily users, this one cafe had about 800 daily transactions and was operational 248 days out of the calendar year. Before the reuse transition project here, about 85, so we did a bunch of observational studies there. And when employees are given the choice to choose a single-use item versus a reusable item that is absolutely available to them, they're sitting there, they're dining in the cafe, and 85 to 90% of daily diners were actually opting for single-use items because they felt that as they're labeled compostable, they were maybe better for the planet. And there was some serious misperceptions around that. But this is a perfect example of one diner's meal at the end of service. So they would order their food. It'd be this crazy weird mix. So 85 to 90% of diners were either dining in all single-use items and completing their meal there, and then follow through to watch them go to the resource collection stations or the waste stations and seeing how every time materials were going into the wrong streams. They basically show that, everyone was dining on this crazy mix of single use and reuse, and sometimes all single use. But before the project transition, we were targeting 48 SKUs of single use foodware packaging. Over 4 million units of those single use items they were going through annually, costing over $163,000 and generating over 30 tons of waste. That at Genentech, that one campus cafe working with Bon Appetit was able to purchase over $20,000 of reusables and some, infrastructure supplies to support the reuse operation. Their ongoing costs annually were $24,000 to repurchase any lost or damaged units, to support, purchasing washing supplies and additional hour of labor per day to wash those units. After implementation of those 48 targeted items, we eliminated over 1 million pieces. Annual net cost savings was over $12,000. We eliminated 5.79 tons of waste, and 23 metric tons of greenhouse gas emission reduction was achieved. So we were able to hit a 25% reduction of the targeted 48 items of single use, and the payback period was average 5.5 months. And I brought this slide up because I think especially as we're coming out of this crazy pandemic conditions and pandemic era dining. And I think, as we see this kind of grand reopening of society and operations and campuses and institutions, I think there are some concerns and challenges around the perceptions and safety of reuse, and also that there may be kind of a move towards a faster, quicker grab and go style dining. And with that can come really an explosion of single-use foodware packaging products. And so I just remind everyone that as we reopen and as we come back to full operations again, that, reusables are allowed, they're safe. We have a bunch of materials on our website showcasing that, reuse is safe. And if it has a food permit, it's going to go through rigorous, enforcement and checking to make sure that those systems are safe and up to code and standard. That it is allowed and encouraged for you as a person to BYO or bring your own cups and containers for refill, and that is allowed as well. But mainly to focus on the easy wins, which are simply don't throw in a bunch of unneeded packaging if it's not necessary. We have a campaign at Upstream called Skip the Stuff. But basically, if you just need the container, you really probably don't need the 20 additional napkins, the utensils, the, packets and single-use packets and things like that. And also, to just try to do whatever you can to reduce those unnecessary, accessible, disposable items. And I just wanted to tease a few things that we have coming up by the end of the year, 2021 at Upstream. The first is, and hopefully I can join this community again in a few months when I'm ready to really unveil a new software solution that we are developing at Upstream. It's going to be essentially like Lean Path, but targeting foodware packaging waste prevention. Our target audiences will be large concessionaires, food management companies, campuses, school, corporate, government buildings, and city governments. And with the software solution tool, we will be building community around that tool. And we're calling this the Food Service Reuse Task Force. So we know that there's a lot of folks out there that are working to try to incorporate more source reduction recommendations and practices and more transitions to reuse. And I think a lot of these large institutional campuses are in a very similar state in terms of what challenges they're facing. And so I figure let's build a task force to kind of work through those challenges, discuss results, best practices, more case studies such as the ones I've presented today. We have some pilots that we have wrapped and are launching, focus in takeout and delivery. By the end of the month, hopefully the first week of July, we will be releasing our latest publication, which looks at large scale events and the various different material types of single use and reusable cups in terms of their life cycle analyses and kind of comparing different large scale event scenarios. I think that's going to be a really useful tool. I don't know if you all know, but tomorrow is Global Refill Day. And so to time with Refill Day, Upstream will be launching our Reuse Wins white paper. I think this audience might be very interested to learn more about that. So I welcome you to join us on our website and to make sure you get access to that report. Launching a national, it's called the Reusables, the National Awards Program focused on refill and reuse companies innovating in the space. And policy playbook. So if you're interested in how to pass a policy in your local community from end to end, we'll be having that up on our website probably by the end of the summer. And please do join us. We have all sorts of ways to stay connected with Upstream. We're just laser focused in kind of innovating towards that reuse economy. So we have various communication platforms, such as our live stream series is monthly. It's widely popular. If you've missed it, you can go onto that website to see all the previous ones that launched during COVID, when we realized we were really trying to connect with our audiences through a virtual time. We have a weekly podcast. We have the National Reuse Network. A campaign just launched last week called the Reusable Blitz. And of course, we have one of the largest and most up-to-date data directories showcasing different reuse services and businesses in the US. And I know that space was one of the biggest challenges mentioned earlier, but there are really innovative companies and startups and entrepreneurs growing into providing those reusable services as third-party vendors. So whether you need the containers plus the washing as, you know, an off-site service, or you have the containers and you just need to, you know, find the potential services that could do the washing for you, they're out there. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. Here's my contact information. And of course, our website for Upstream.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Samantha. And as you can see, reuse saves you money, it saves you time, and Upstream has the resources you need. So we're going to move on to our next speaker, but remember to put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we will answer them after Nina's presentation. So next up, I am very excited to present Nina Butler, who's the CEO of Stina Inc. And she's going to be sharing her Circularity in Action platform, which is just going to transform everything, because we need this information public. We need it global. We need it shared. And so this is open source, and nobody better to lead this than Nina, who is just a guru and recycling, closing the loop, and making sure that we're actually doing the right thing. So we have a couple of polls. First of all is, and we're going to do these quickly, what is the resale value of 1 ton of PET? And the other one is, do you have a plastic reprocessor in your local area? So not a recycler, but a reprocessor. So we're going to do these very quickly. So just a couple of seconds to fill these out. These are mainly just to get you thinking. So with that, Susie, we're going to go ahead and close the poll. So 25. Okay, so as we know, markets are all over the place, and that's what we want to do. We want to make it transparent. And then the reprocessor. Okay, this is what we thought. I don't know what that is. So we're going to talk more about that, and Nina's going to showcase what she's doing. So with that, I'd like to welcome Nina Butler.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate being here, and also learning from Samantha. So let me see if I'm sharing my screen. Yeah. So Stephanie, I just want to acknowledge is really in this time of transition from business as usual to a new paradigm, I really keep an eye out for the folks that are really leaning into collaboration and information sharing. And I think that Stephanie is really that kind of quintessential true collaborator. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. I love working with you, Stephanie. So as far as our company, some may have not heard of our company before. We were more recycling. And this, not only are we going through a pandemic, experiencing so many shifts across society right now. And I think many recognize the need for more harmony so that we can really move from this linear model to a circular economy. And as a company, we've been doing businesses more recycling for almost 30 years. It is essential. Recycling is absolutely important, but it's one means to achieving circularity, and a lot more is needed. We need strong leadership. We need that collaboration, as I mentioned, to really, and it's that collaboration, I think, that's going to unleash the human ingenuity. When I testified about this time last summer before Congress, I said we need North Star policy that really valorizes resources and unlocks that innovation. And then, so we've rebranded, and this is our logo that really represents both that North Star and the symbol of the seed of life, which is really about this balance piece. So the visual representation of our vision, which is to harmonize human behavior with the natural world. So Stina is a mission-based company, and we conduct research and analysis, and we work on fostering collaboration. And then we also work on data visualization and making all this information as publicly available and accessible as possible. So over the years, we've developed a lot of tools as we saw needs across the value chain. And we've been conducting the annual plastic recycling for the US and Canada, the numerator that provides the information to EPA to come up with the recycling rate. And so in both developing programs and being in the trenches of literally sorting out what is going to our different recyclers into the waste stream, trying to develop these programs and tracking the landscape, I'm very intimately aware of kind of where we're going and the challenges that we face and just how strong the inertia is to stay in this linear model. So last year we launched Circularity in Action as a platform to really bring more of these tools together. And it's through that notion of better data provides better decision making, that we need to drive smarter policy, greater innovation in this action by all players in the stakeholder. So we have this clearinghouse of tools. And so it's not just our tools, but so we've organized the directory. It's about the actions needed to get to circularity, including our tools. So we've envisioned this as a resource for all that are striving for harmony in business and their personal lives. So we launched the beta version, and now we're deep into the design. So what I'm going to share with you today is kind of a flavor of the content and the thinking behind what we need to bring forward as we launch Circularity in Action 2.0. So in addition to telling the story, it's that linear to circular movement. What is the state of play for different materials? It's not just plastic, but that's our area of expertise. It's recognizing leaders, and it's making information as accessible as possible. But it's also, and I love seeing the work that Upstream is doing, and True is also featuring and bringing forward different experts. So we raise the circularity IQ, or our acumen. I'm a big fan of the organization Acumen, Jacqueline Novogratz, and it's, how do we bring that awareness with impact? And then just more tools that we're developing, as well as our partners and those that have the distinct tools to support circularity, and then eventually moving into more of that network. Samantha mentioned that, like connecting with other entities within your value stream, within your ecosystem, that you can amplify the work that's happening. So in this presentation, I'm going to go through these 4 areas that we're going to be developing with kind of a quick flavor of it, and then get into just how you guys might be able to get involved. So this story of the linear to circular, I noticed that Samantha said it's not just about plastic, it's about all of the materials. And part of the challenge is, how do you navigate all of the different trade-offs across materials and how commerce happens today? Samantha also mentioned that the COVID-19, how much has shifted, or we've gotten more comfortable with as a society in terms of expecting single-use things in a pandemic. Have we, even as things open up, have we developed more of a habit for ordering everything online? Obviously, there's been dramatic growth in plastic because of medical and pharma connected to the pandemic. So we know where we're headed is not good. And this is just one of those kind of big magnifying global growth demand in plastic. The US has been the big one, but it's really shifting globally in terms of where the demand is going. And so we've got these dueling issues around both greenhouse gas emissions and plastic waste. And during COVID, we saw this kind of some relief from the greenhouse gas emissions briefly, but a dramatic increase in how much plastic's going into the ocean with all of the loss of a lot of the plastic, specifically around COVID, actually. But this paradox is the piece that I think is incredibly important. And I think as you navigate reusable and which material type, we've sort of made this almost Hobson's choice of, do I use this or that? Both have problems. And I think it's also very connected to looking at it as we think about a completely new business paradigm, is where are we shipping what and how are we using things? So just some things that are not always very obvious to people is that plastics, from what we know right now, and this is still under research, is how much CO2 or greenhouse gas emissions are released when plastics are breaking down. But if you draw the scope of production and use, they're roughly 4% of greenhouse gas emissions. So the heavy pieces of where we have impact and where we can change greenhouse gas emissions, according to the Drawdown Project and others, is how we manage our food, which is around 8% of greenhouse gas emissions, but also refrigerants. So that comes back to, well, how do we move and transport and package the food that we have? It really is an important question. And because we're using so much plastic, I think about fossil fuels as almost like the opposite of our kryptonite. It's we're living like superhumans, breathing underwater, able to communicate outside of our atmosphere. We're really able to do phenomenal things because of fossil fuels and by extension plastics. But then has this moon shooting kind of overshot Earth's carrying capacity, that we, again, we're producing more man-made materials I already have than the entire biomass. So we're living out of balance. And then looking at it from an equity perspective and just where materials produced and ending up around the world, what share of the ownership do we also take on in the United States and beyond? We are definitely large producers, but in the United States, we're having kind of a loss of our middle class, and then watching that growth in the middle class around the rest of the world as they also want to live in the sort of superhuman way. That's why we have this just phenomenal expected growth in demand in plastic over the next 30 years. So as Bill Sheehan said, we cannot recycle ourselves out of this. We have a trickle of recycling compared to a tsunami of new production of plastic coming online. So we're striving towards this circular economy, but the barriers are so significant that we've got to look at how do we create the disruption in a way that breaks the inertia from a linear to a circular one. And it really is just economics 101. When it's cheaper to dispose and when it's cheaper to use virgin and we externalize the cost and there's not the transparency and accountability, you are fiduciarily irresponsible sometimes if you're doing the right thing for the environment. In other countries, particularly in Europe, your performance is tied to sustainability at some companies. And that's a very difficult piece of policy to implement in this country. So as I mentioned, we track the state of plastic recycling, and this is something we're going to be making much more available on Circularity in Action 2.0, but we're not moving in the right direction. You can see that after 2016, we had a pretty big drop. And this is all as we're kind of adjusting and transitioning because we were so dependent on the export markets. Now we've got this kind of leveling out. So our actual overall recycling has gone down. And so when we need the amount collected and the capacity to process material to catch up to just the sheer volume of virgin production. So the chart on the right is showing if you take just the top 10 virgin resin producers of just polyolefins compared to all of the reclaimers in the US and Canada, we've got less than 5%. So if we're wildly successful in collecting everything, we don't have the capacity to process this, and there's very little business opportunity to really grow that as rapidly as it needs to be, even though in the last 6 months, we've seen billions of dollars invested in recycling. To make that sustainable, we have to address the core economics. So again, going back to economics, don't fight the forces. We need to use economic forces. So as we try to illustrate what circularity is, it's really an act in storytelling. And the challenge is that to be authentic to circularity, it is complex. Nature is very complex and it's very interdependent. So the goal is to provide the complexity, but also to really focus strategically into what are the actions needed that develop the momentum needed to shift from the linear to circular. And I think the word, sustainability is the buzzword still, and it needs to be at the top of our zeitgeist. But so the other important word that we need to keep in mind is that transparency. If we want economic forces to work, we need more of that transparency. So here's kind of the big view of around the value chain, the major actions and the players that we need to connect with. So in the tool now, you can click in and get access to tools specific to where you are in the value chain and the actions, but this is what we want to grow. So I mentioned with the linear to circular story is kind of the first big section of build. The next is recognizing those engines of the circular economy, from the demand champions that the Association of Plastic Recyclers have, to the giants of the recycling economy, those that are using significant volumes of recycled content, the innovators and equipment and technology that are going to support this movement. When we see not just one company get to a high recycling rate, but the entire value chain working together and really driving the policy that's needed. And I think upstream is an important player in this dialogue around how do we get the right technology or the right policy in place that will unleash this innovation and really shift the paradigm of business and embrace those economic pieces. So this is not just in the United States, but there's a global plastic treaty underway. There is more advanced development in controversial things like plastic chemical recycling in Europe, because there's requirements that they find solutions for their problems, much more pressure than there is here. And then how do we bring those experts together that are going to talk about with logistics, and considering the fact that you can think about, you want something from Amazon and get it that day. We know how to handle logistics in this country. My husband is a logistics expert, but we haven't applied it to developing the reverse logistics. Right now, we basically rely on putting things into one stream and trying to figure out how to get it back. We haven't even tapped the potential of utilizing all of the networks that are in place to capture material at the highest and best use. But to really look further, and I like the word upstream, looking upstream in terms of how do we make better decisions in terms of what's coming in, because we have to deal with it coming back. Some of the examples of experts that we want to feature in this growing circularity acumen or IQ are the economists that are looking at how we value nature and carbon cycles, because until that shift happens, it's going to be economically difficult to make the case for really widespread recovery. The logistics experts that are help us do the network modeling that's needed to find your ecosystem and how you connect with those processors. The chemical recycling experts, because it's going to have to be a part of the solution, I'm afraid. When you think about the fact that packaging is a large percentage of what gets produced, but what we're using right now in terms of our computer, the clothing that we're wearing, the instruments that I'm going to use next week when we head out for an expedition in Alaska to study the amount of plastic washing up in Kodiak Island. It's this plastic material that enables us to get better data, but we don't have a recovery solution for that. And because we're not looking upstream enough, we also have a lot of materials that are frankly unsafe to get back in without real regulation and management of the contaminants that get carried along with a lot of this plastic. So before we launched Circularity in Action, we created an info exchange because we knew that there was a lot of work done on recycling market development in the late 80s and early 90s before we became kind of lax in trying to figure out how to recover more. We were able to send a lot of the mixed plastic, mixed paper, and other materials to China and other countries. And so there's been kind of a slowdown in that collaboration between government and industry in building market development. So we did a kind of a search of everything that's been going on, working with another group, Circular Matters, to bring that institutional knowledge forward, and then again turn it into a directory so that you can search by state and the various activities across different types of recycling activity across the country. So that's also on circularityinaction.com, and we look forward to building more of that out and featuring new developments. Another tool that we're going to be bringing forward is this decision tree for recyclability. This is the big question of the day, but how do I figure out if my package is in fact deemed recyclable? Because again, when we had this ability to send some of it overseas, as long as material is being collected at a community, then you would consider that you have access. But as that question of, is that true recyclability? There's also the technical recyclability, and it's all of it together that we've worked through. How do you determine that you've checked each of the elements of recyclability to get your product to a claim of full recyclability? So this is still in development, and this is one piece of what I would consider moving towards a true circularity quotient. There's the recyclability, the life cycle impact, and the recycled content. So we need to build out basically 3 more branches of this tree ultimately. There's always a need to connect buyers and suppliers in the marketplace. We maintain plasticmarkets.org, which is also available in Circularity in Action. So you can search for buyers of baled material, but also suppliers of post-consumer resin here. So as we have more partners, we're going to provide more detail and filtering capabilities. So you can search, does the supplier have a letter of non-objection? Is it food grade compliant, or a letter of third-party certification? And to create more of that transparency for the products that actually already have recycled content, there was kind of some difficult to find, like, well, how much recycled content? Is it post-consumer or is it post-industrial? We created the Buy Recycled Products Directory, again, available on circularityinaction.com. And these are all free to use tools. There's no pay to play. But here's kind of an interesting look into the profile of the products that are listed. And I'm kind of paying a little more attention to this because we're wrapping up an interesting study for another country looking at use of food grade PCR in different applications, and where are the barriers for different resins and the trade-offs along the way, along the value chain. PET dominates recycled content, and there are physical characteristics for that, but it's also what it's going into. So thinking again upstream, what are we making? Why are we making it? Why are we using it? Are we using the best material, both for its actual purpose and how we're going to get it back into the system? So here's the directory of tools as it exists. And so achieving this circularity requires a movement, and this requires a reason to take action, to inspire and equip more to take this action. We want to collaborate and bring in more thought partners in this process. And becoming a thought partner, there's both just simple like sponsorship, but it's more about bringing the right players that have the same vision and willing to work at the magnitude, the scale of the problem. One of our thought partners for 2021, 22, and hopefully beyond is the World Wildlife Fund, developing a really cool interactive learning environment, taking the user through kind of a typical household and being able to really ponder plastic, and not just plastic, but what's the alternative to plastic? What are the things that we all can work towards in terms of reducing our impact? And then another thought partner is the Association of Plastic Recyclers. We're shifting the way that we report the data for the annual plastic recycling studies, so making more of a portal on circularity and action. APRs providing the support for us to build out that section for plastic, but we'll be hopefully working with other material organizations to bring out this information portal for other materials as well. So we are seeking those thought partners and sustainers. So it's being affiliated with this type of work, but also our significant sustainers and thought partners. Also, we reserve our expertise, our subject matter experts within our team to be available on a regular basis. So we're doing less as a company in terms of direct consulting, because the information we try to make available really needs to be approachable and built into a network so that we can move into this true circular system. And we're going to be, as we have partners towards the end of August, we're going to be doing a fun video shoot with Lawrence Fishburne. And so we'll be featuring our thought partners and those that are getting engaged in this transition to circularity and getting that nice wide distribution. So I look forward to hearing from folks. If you have ideas, if you'd like more of the information that's available, please get in touch with me. So, oh, and just one kind of final quote: the potential for innovation through inspiration from nature is as great as the risk we face by ignoring nature's signals. And that's what we want to work together to help unlock that innovation.
Thank you so much, Nina. And I just want to appreciate everybody on the call for you taking this time to invest in our future. And I hope you'll fully take advantage of Nina and Samantha's expertise and what they're offering. I've been waiting for years and years to have this information, so I hope you're excited as much as I am. We do have a couple of questions, and I know we're getting near the top of the hour. We are going to do a little speed networking. If you can't stay on, we totally understand. We'll be working through this process in the future. So the first question is from Gary List to Samantha, and he's asked, How can cities help expand reuse programs and fund reuse infrastructure?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And my response to that is, we're imagining the future where we have reuse and refill infrastructure, services, and businesses participating and consumers participating at the community level. That is a hard nut to crack, I'm not going to lie. And I don't know of any really good existing models to look to currently to say, oh, this is how we fund it. This is the infrastructure that's needed. These are the public-private partners that we can bring to the table to provide the much needed funding. What I would say is just last week, I advocated for an additional $25 million in reuse grants to the state legislature to be included in the budget. As maybe most of the folks or some folks in the California market here know, Cal Recycle, had finally released some funding, although not nearly enough. There were two $500,000 grants that were handed out to a refillable bottle company, Conscious Container, focused in refilling beer and wine bottles, getting those washed and back to the distributor suppliers, which I think is revolutionary. And also Sudbusters, some of you may know Michael, to offer mobile dishwashing and reuse for large scale events. So clearly this is exciting stuff, but we need a lot more funding injection into the innovations in this space. And the last quick thing I would share there is, we need to be able to have cross-sectional partnerships between industries. So my vision for the future is where, we have the smallest landfill bin, the recycle bin, the organics bin, but the fourth bin, how do we get to that fourth bin? That's the reuse refill bin, where we have different businesses using interoperable products. So when you, go out and at your home or at the businesses or at the grocery store, if you're checking out the refillable, home product cleaning supply in a refillable container, or you're taking your coffee or food to go or in a meal delivery kit, that you just put your reuse into that fourth bin. And what would it look like if we had partnerships with the haulers? They're experts in, collecting, sorting, and processing. And then how do we build out infrastructure for regional dishwashing hubs and capacity? So the last thing I'll say, it's a mouthful to say very quickly, much longer conversation, but Upstream is being commissioned by the state of California to develop a feasibility reuse and refill study. All of these things that I've just mentioned will be part of that, looking at the economic impacts, the environmental impacts, how many jobs can be created in California. I'm looking to build a task force around that. I think it's going to be really exciting, cutting edge, probably one of my dream projects. So if you're interested in staying tuned or joining the conversation, please do email me. We're going to launch that project most likely by the end of the summer. It's going to go for a year.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Thank you, Samantha. And the next question and last question I'm going to pose to Nina, and I know this is a huge subject and we could probably have a 3-day workshop on it. But Nina, if you can touch a little bit on chemical recycling, and we know there's the one that it goes to fuel, waste to fuel, and the other is plastic to plastic. And I think that's a big thing, is we've got to get our language correct in moving into the circular economy. But if you could touch on that a little bit and any resources, that would be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, this is kind of the technology is not new. So I think that's something to keep really in mind. And it's fundamentally, again, an economic and environmental issue. And so there is the break free from plastic, and the 8 actions for presidential actions to take action on plastic is something to really delve in and look at, because one of the actions in that is that we shouldn't have any new permits on new facilities. And I think it's connected to, because we've also not addressed the equity issue, the impact that a lot of the petrochemical production has on disadvantaged communities. So again, this upstream issue is incredibly important. So but within that, so one of the questions is, do I consider fuel part of recycling? And no, I think it has to be, that is one end of life option. but we need to develop policy that is based, that has eco-modulation, that it really has to do with what is the environmental impact of your product all the way through the life cycle, and then what's going to happen to it. Right now, we're many years out from having real commercial scale chemical recycling in this country. There's much more movement in Europe. And so the carbon impact of chemical recycling is pretty through the roof. It's not a great story. But the other problem is that we don't regulate toxins in our environment the way that, say, Europe does with REACH legislation. So we have all these legacy materials that are not necessarily the safest to get back into the amount of food contact and other, medical and toys and things like that safely. So we've got to figure out how to deal with those legacy materials. Chemical recycling will play a role, but it's through the use of eco-modulation that dictates what value you get in the credit for where the material ends up. But I do think, realistically, knowing the entire landscape of what's produced and where it can feasibly get back into the marketplace, because there's huge differences between the olefins, the engineering grade, versus PET that has a lower barrier to getting back into the system, it's going to have to play a role, unfortunately. And again, it goes back to, like, one of the polling questions should have been, what are we willing to give up? So, I was thinking about the gear that I'm going to need out in Alaska, all this electronic, the wiring that allows for me to have clean and hot water in my house. None of that's going to go into the recycling system right now. So these are the hard realities we need to come to terms with sooner than later.
Thank you. And yes, there's tough questions ahead, but I think if we can collaborate, if we can share, if we can have a shared mission, and with experts like Nina and Samantha, and I have to say, True is just so excited because we have so many partners, not only with businesses, but service providers, nonprofits globally. And we're seeing our biggest growth right now is in India, and they're in the middle of a pandemic, but they know how important it is to reach zero waste. And so I want to say thank you to Samantha and Nina. And Nina, safe travels. We will have them back. Please get on their websites, connect with them. And we had a question from a college student. Just email us and you can get involved. Samantha, did you have a quick? Just saying goodbye. Okay, so thank you very much to our speakers. We're going to try and do a quick round of networking. So we know for those of you that have to get off, that is totally fine. We're just probably going to do one round. It'll be less than 10 minutes. We do have to have you go to another link. And we're in this call and stop the recording, and then we'll send another link. So those of you that can get on, and this will be our true pilot for speed networking. And what most organizations do is they have the webinar an hour and a half. And I've done it with several different organizations, and we want to get to know you and see how we can collaborate. So I think, Susie, do you want to?
Yeah, the link is in the chat for everyone to access. It's a Zoom link. So go ahead and end this meeting that you're in. I'll be ending it quite quickly because I'm going to try to join you all in the speed networking as well. So yeah, it's the Zoom link that our great, I think it was Lauren put into the chat. Sorry, I don't see who's put it in there, but you'll see it's ends in 09. So go ahead and click on that and we'll see you there in just a few minutes. Oh, make sure you copy the passcode. 687050 is the passcode. Thanks everybody. See you on the other side.